One of the most popular contributors to the programme has to be Michael O'Doherty, who's the founder of Bioenergy Healing and a pioneer, indeed, in the field of healthcare. And he joins me once again in studio. Good morning to you, Michael.
Good morning, Fran. Great to be back. Thank you.
You're welcome here at any time. And indeed, you brought Helen McGrath with you as well. We'll be chatting to Helen. Hello, Helen. How are you? We'll be chatting to Helen a little later on as well. You're going to talk to us about several things today. First of all, Michael, coping with and recovering from illness. What about that?
Yeah, look, for the last 30 years I've been involved in the field of healthcare, and the more and more I go on, the more I feel there's a huge need for education, that people need to be educated as to how it is they're going to overcome their problems. And we see so many different types of diseases today that exist, so many different new medical terms coming on board. Everything seems to be autoimmune, and now it's pretty much impossible to get your GP, and hospitals are overloaded, and so really people at the moment seem to be stuck, seem to be lost. And it's like I was explaining to a guy in a clinic this week who suffered a bit of stress and anxiety and all of that. I explained to him that when you're driving down the road in your car and something drives out in front of you, automatically you're going to hit the brakes. Okay, so you hit the brakes, your body goes into stress, and when you hit the brakes, obviously the car stops, and that's a very stressful, traumatic situation. Now, as we go on in life, we go through the same situation. When we go on in life, living our normal days, working, whatever, and then suddenly we encounter a problem. For some reason or other, we get fatigued, we end up getting aches or pains, digestive problems, maybe getting a serious illness, going to the doctors, having it diagnosed and prognosis and all this kind of stuff. And I equate that to the car. In a sense, what happens is we go along in life, something negative happens, then what happens is our brakes are put on. And what that is, that it's our nervous system. Our autonomic nervous system, it actually puts on the brakes in our body. Our body goes into stress and we start firing out stress hormones. And for the last number of years, from what I see, is that people are stuck in this space then. The brakes are on, which I mean that the autonomic nervous system is in overload. It's trying to slow the body down. We're pushing against the grain. We're involved in so much where people are pushing themselves to the limit. And what happens basically then is people don't recover. They don't know how to cope with their problems because they're pushing themselves. They don't know how to recover or what is even going to take them to recover. And what I wanted to chat to you about was what it takes to recover from illness, what it takes to manage even illness, and what it takes to prevent illness. And ultimately, that is really back to educating people as to what is required.
It's interesting. There's all sorts of challenges, because I was talking to Helen earlier on, and she was saying that her condition, which we will talk about in a few moments' time, autoimmune. And I was telling you that in my case, with an issue that I have, they put a big broad term of neurological in some way. And these things, then, we get the impression that nothing can be done for them, that it's chronic and we have to deal with it.
Yeah, and that's a very valid point. You see, there's a number of ways that we have to think about this. So I want to I'm thinking of people's mindsets right now. People are listening to this show and they're saying, okay, Michael, I have an autoimmune problem. It could be a rheumatology issue, could be ulcerative colitis, something like that, but and that's fine. I say, okay, that's fine. So you take your immunosuppressants and you take your steroids or whatever's required, that's fine. But now the question is, where's the problem coming from and how you're really dealing with it? So while medication has a role to play, people need to go back and ask themselves key questions. Now, the challenge or I suppose when it is a challenge, because the challenge is in the mind, in the sense that we're brought up to believe that if we take a certain drug, it cures our problem. If we use a certain method of treatment, it cures our problem. The reality is it doesn't. It is that illusion that people have to waken up out of, that there's some magic pill, magic bullet that's going to solve our problem. So no matter what situation we are in, there are ways of solving it, but it isn't by you just being an observer. So people out there listening who have maybe autoimmune problems or some condition, well, the first thing they have to be doing, they have to be given a strategy to recover. Now, there is this principle in military, and they operate in what they call the 3-foot world. Okay, so basically what that means is that if you find yourself if military guys find themselves in stressful situations, and that could be a sports player, could be somebody in sales here today in Tipp FM, or it could be anyone in business, or it could be somebody with their health. The whole idea is that you operate in what we call this 3-foot world model. What does that mean? It means you focus on what's relevant, you focus on what matters, number one, and then you focus on what you're in control of. So So if you're sick and you're stressed and you've some disease or whatever, now what I'm asking people to do is focus on what matters. So what matters? What matters is you. What matters is your health. What matters is your family. What matters is your job. That's it. Nothing else matters except that. Now, the thing about it is this, what I find is when people come to me, they're not focusing on themselves or their family or anything else. But on top of that, they're involved in this committee, that committee, the other committee. They're expending energy in things they shouldn't have. Even with children, I get children coming to my clinic who are burnt out, who are playing camogie, who are playing football for club, for county, they're driving to college, they're studying, and there's only so much fuel in the tank. And what happens is if there's only so much fuel in the tank, at some point we're going to have to stop and refuel. So if we stop, no matter what the problem is, if we stop right now, everybody listening to this, stop and focus on what matters. And then take control of what you're in control of. If you take control of what you're in control of and change the things you can change, then we can start getting into the cause of the problem.
But will that make me better?
That's the first step in getting you better.
Yeah.
So the first step in getting you better is waking up from the illusion that there is no magic wand or magic pill, that this is going to require time, effort and commitment from you. That's the first step. 2, take control of what you're in control of, focus on what matters, and pull back your energies from all the stuff you're giving your energy to. You're giving your energy to committees, to organizations. Pull that back. You need that energy for your body to recover. Then the next step is trying to identify what it is that might have caused your problem. So it could have been the fact you were just pushing yourself too much. So we're going to pull back the energies. But there could be some underlying stress maybe from our childhood. It could be the nature of the birth of the child. It could be that could manifest in our teens or later life. It could be some traumatic event that happened at work.
And if it is that, can that be solved?
Absolutely. Every situation can be solved.
How?
There's always a solution. So first of all, when I get somebody, the first thing we do is, like I said to you, when we push ourselves to the limit and when the brakes come on and the sympathetic nervous system kicks in and you're in survival mode, what I have discovered is that when we work with the energy system of the body, so we break your body right down, and what we've discovered is that your body has an internal operating system we call the energy system. It's been established medically, scientifically. Anybody who wants to see the science will send them the research. But the research, the data says your body is made up of energy, and if that energy breaks down, then there's a biochemical change. So the first thing we have to do is to reset the system. Like your phone, if your phone doesn't function right, you switch it off, switch it on again, or you press the reset button. The body has a similar mechanism. Okay, these are rhythmic systems of the body, circadian, ultradian rhythmic systems. But the whole idea is to reset the system. What we have discovered is that when we work with the energy system of the body, that it helps to reset the system. By that I mean it takes the patient from the stressful survival mode space and it brings them back into the parasympathetic or normal mode space. Now,
and for that, sorry, Michael, to interrupt you, but for that, do you have to address the issues that might have caused you trauma? Do you have to acknowledge them and address
absolutely them? And for some people, you see, part of the strategy then will be to adapt, because illness is often a byproduct of our behavior, our experiences in life. Health and healing is a byproduct of our behavior and our experiences. So we change things. So sometimes I have to bring other medics on, other people on board, which it might be a psychologist or psychiatrist to help, depending on the nature of the problem. It could be a cardiovascular or somebody.
So you work alongside
absolutely.
medicine like that.
The whole idea is to put into place that model to help people to recover. But once we start to get the energies flowing, and we get people back into that relaxed space, and then they start to sleep better. That's restorative. Okay, then what happens is we're supporting that with the right nutrition. So people bring in a nutritional program into place. And then they start doing, working with their emotional stress on a day-to-day basis through breathing and certain techniques that we will teach them. And then from there, getting them out in nature. And if people just start to do all these things, and we've talked about them before, but the critical thing is what I was said at the beginning. It's that first time, it's that first space. It's stopping, getting into that 3-foot world space and taking control of what they're in control of, dealing with what matters to them closely and pulling back their energies. I'm saying to people out there, they are putting their energies into too much. Right. Children are doing it. and they're trying to study, and is it any wonder they're stressed and anxious, and parents are at their wits' end trying then to solve the problem.
Let's find out how it works on a practical level, because we're delighted to be joined in the studio as well by Helen McGrath. Helen, you're from Newcastle. Lovely to see you, Helen. How are you?
Good. I'm good. I'm really well now and healthy, thank God.
And I'm delighted to hear that. Before
for
you
letting
met,
me be in to tell you.
You're very welcome indeed. Before we hear what Michael did for you, will you tell me about your condition and how it manifested itself over the years?
Well, it was about 8 years ago that these little spots here and there around the back of my neck and top of my shoulders appeared, and they'd bleed for Ireland, and they were itchy. So even when I'd lie down in bed, my pillow would have blood in it in the morning, because and the sheets when I'd be turning in the night. And
this just came on you, did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
But like right now, and Michael kind of helped me to. I realised that it was a very stressful time at the time. I had it wasn't my illness, it was a family member who was ill and didn't know what was wrong with her. And I think that it must have been from there.
So you were very stressed.
I was.
Did you go to consultants?
I did.
Okay.
I went to 2 different dermatologists in Waterford and
what
Cork.
did they tell you, Helen?
They both told me at different times, because I wanted to make sure, was this really right? They both told me it was autoimmune.
So you got a second opinion.
Yeah.
And they both. And what was your understanding of autoimmune?
Autoimmune, that it was my own body attacking itself.
Right.
That's all so my immune system was kind of gone a bit haywire.
Right.
And I was prescribed different steroid skin ointments.
Heavy duty stuff.
Yeah. And, then of course you're not to use that too much or too long, and time went on after the 2 different dermatologists.
Did the topical stuff help?
For the first 2 or 3 days, she's getting better now. And then it would all come back the same, or even maybe worse again. And I used to go to my doctor then, and I was prescribed a kind of a low level antibiotic over maybe a 3-month period, that kind of a thing.
Did that work?
And antihistamines, no, absolutely not.
And was it causing you great distress?
Awful. Because like if you have a pain, that's awful.
Yeah.
But if you have an itchy feeling around your neck, your shoulders, your arms, and
bleeding,
you're not supposed to scratch, don't scratch it.
So you tried,
and bleeding like mad.
You tried consultants, you tried GPs, you tried everything else.
Yeah.
At what stage did you link up with Michael O'Doherty?
Well, I'd say off and on with about a year. I knew about him. I heard about him the time of Michael Flatley, when Michael wasn't well, and how he sorted that issue with Michael Flatley. And Michael O'Doherty was my last straw. I just don't know where I'll go next. So I mean, this is 8 years later, and I made the decision before Christmas. I rang his office. I found a number. Found him on Facebook. Yeah. And I rang the office.
And what happened? You went down to
So I got the appointment for the 7th of February. I was there with him on that morning, and it was going to be a commitment of 4 mornings with him for about an hour and a half. And I just I'm open to everything. So I was open to whatever this was, and I knew what bioenergy was anyway, because I had a treatment or 2 before, a long time ago, with somebody else. And so Michael, after the first, I can honestly say I stayed in Ennis for the 4 days.
Right.
And after the first treatment with Michael, I could honestly say I could feel something easing in me. And I did then, all I had to do was turn up those 4 days. Then I was given the work to do. So the work to do for me, because of my skin, and Michael said my issues were gut related. So I had to change my eating. And I am not much of a cook, I can tell you now. I'm a very basic. Give me a shovel and a sprung outside. I'm an outdoory person.
But not the saucepan.
So no, I'm husband. He wouldn't mind me saying it, but I cook basic.
Right.
So on the way home from Michael's clinic, I came shopping to Clonmel because I had to go and buy stuff that I wouldn't have ever looked at. We'll say gluten-free. Gluten-free, get rid of gluten, get rid of wheat, get rid of dairy and sugar.
Right.
So that's a
big ask. That's a big ask. And did it work?
Well, look, I'm telling you, I went into Tesco. I shouldn't be saying the place, but I went in anyway, trying to see this is stuff now I never looked at in my whole life. So I was buying things. The shopping bill for the first couple of weeks was high because of the fact that I bought organic carrots and things like that, and whole food. I'd be into whole food anyway. I would never be buying or eat a square meal, as in a square yolk in the freezer, you know, that you pick up. No, so I would have been cooking whole food, but this was different kind of. But I can tell you now,
a big difference.
In 10 days, my skin was cleared.
Isn't that incredible?
It was cleared.
Tell us about this. What did you? Do you mind if we talk about you, Helen? What did you discover about Helen?
I think that Helen hit the nail on the head at the very beginning of it. That she felt an ease of something, and this was the point I was making earlier. That when you work with the energy system in the right way, you release that stress, because what happens is we adapt to that survival mode space, and Helen had adapted to that survival mode space. So the central
because of her relative who was unwell,
which is often the case. Yeah. So when that happens, and your nervous system goes into overload, then automatically every system of your body breaks down. Not breaks down is probably the wrong word, but it doesn't function properly, which means then that your digestive system doesn't function properly. So we could still be on a perfectly healthy diet, and we could still be taking loads of supplements, but if we're stressed and if we don't release that stress out of the body, then the body's still not going to function properly. So the key was to take Helen and release that stressor, and she felt that ease the first day, as many people do. And then we asked,
it's like a weight off shoulders.
It is that,
yeah.
And that is 90% of it. And then of course, once you start to do that, because your skin as an organ is the largest organ of the body, it replaces itself regularly, and you know, every 28 days I think it's something like that. And so like any other organ, whether it's your liver or your lung or your intestines, it requires the same attention. And I can get where medicine is at. Medicine will, first of all, they said it was an autoimmune problem, but like, just that's fine. But what does the label do for you? Does it change the way you feel?
It's a very broad.
It's a broad
label,
and the modern scientific and medical evidence is that to imply it's an autoimmune problem means that it's the immune system's problem. But what the modern research is saying, no, it's not. The immune system is involved. But in Helen's case, it was her stress levels, her stress hormones, her internal operating energy system broke down. Our job is to reset that system. But then she supported that with the short-term need of removing what might be toxic to our body. So we see the standard things, and people will say, oh, I went off gluten, dairy before. But that's fine, you can go off them. But it won't. That's not your solution. And the thing is that unless you get the energy first, then once she gets that and once she recovers, if she decides to go back and reintroduce some of those foods again, that's fine, but she'll know she has a reaction to them. It means she can't handle them. So there's lots of different
ways. So it's a suite of different things. Had you any idea that the stress from your relative who was unwell played a part in your illness, Helen?
Well, it was in my mind, you know. I mean, I've read more alternative and holistic books and gone to different things, and I'm always open about things like that. So, you know, and I would be very aware of
but there's
the whole body, you know.
There's no doubt in your mind that you were a much healthier person now.
Oh, absolutely. I'm buzzing.
And the thing about it is this, and I want to say this to people, it isn't that medicine doesn't work. Of course it does. And it isn't that bioenergy doesn't work, or the chiropractic or reflexology or any of these other therapies don't work. The ultimate, and I'm saying this to people, that if you really want to get better, and I'm saying this to people who are listening, it is you that has to do it, the listener.
Yes.
Well, our job is to get the energies flowing, put the necessary program and strategy in place. But if you bring that commitment of time and effort and willing to make the changes and take that responsibility and focus on what you're in control of, I'm saying to people out there, if they come with that mindset, if they're willing to change the attitude, because you have a number of things that you can do, right? There's called, radical acceptance. People, this is where what people do when they're told they have a problem. There's a radical acceptance, meaning that, well, I'm stuck with this and I can't change it. Now, if that's the way you are, then that's fine. But that's what has to change. So the first thing, your attitude and mindset has to change. And then now we need to solve the problem. And to solve the problem, it requires knowledge, understanding, control. It needs strategy. And whether that be in business or education or sport or health. But what I'm saying to people, and there's a lot of people out there who are suffering needlessly, and it's not about what Michael O'Doherty can do, it's about what you can do for yourself. And if people decided just to pull back their energies, take control of what they're in control of, have a look at their nutrition, get out in nature, like we've said in the past, we can change so much. There's so much suffering out there that's needless.
A lot of queries, and a couple of queries, in fact, about fibromyalgia. That's something I guess you come across quite a bit.
Well, look, again, fibromyalgia.
What is that? That's pain right throughout the body.
Well, it's a combination of things.
Yeah.
And you see, fibromyalgia, it's determined by a rheumatologist. Basically, you go to your GP, you have aches and pains, you have inflammation, you have tiredness, you might have somewhat depression, feeling down, but a lot of it is just no energy. It's really burnout. It's really what it is. That can be a hormonal aspect of it, because a lot of women have this, even though men have it as well. And the standard treatment can be prescribed, and I have patients who came to my clinic or on my YouTube channel, they can see, who suffered with this. And while the medication initially is fine, and some people need that medical intervention, I've no problem with that. But I'm saying to people who are in that space, look, the reason you're in that space is because of the model of living you have. So fibromyalgia is a medical term, and you can be put on all of the medications to help you. But to solve the problem, you have to go back and do what we talked about right now, and to talk and to deal with what Helen did. So people with fibromyalgia, it's primarily inflammation. There is often a lot of emotional stress in it. There's obviously the lethargy because people are doing so much. Food definitely is a role because, again, we know that 90% of the human being is made up of microbes. So if the gut microbial ecology is changed, we know medically that if there's an imbalance there, the body is going to produce inflammation. So that inflamed tissue that we get is what we need to stop. And the energy work is great for that because, again, it releases the stress, and then we start dampening down all that inflammation. And eventually people have found that they can reduce and eventually come off, whether it's the sleeping pills, or some people are on antidepressants for this, and some people are anti-anxiety medication because of the pain. Some people are taking then steroids and immunosuppressants sometimes as well. So if you're at that extreme, what I'm saying is, if people were willing to make the changes, and then operate on a 3, 6, 9 month program, Fran, that they give themselves 3 months and say, I'm going to do this for 3 months. Then let's see what happens. And in the next 3 months. It's amazing the change that people can experience.
Just finally, Michael, somebody wondering about nerve pains in the head and the scalp and the side of the head. And they're very concerned about this. Yeah. They've obviously tried everything and well, obviously, of course, wherever you have any kind of pain, and particularly with the head, it's obviously that from a medical perspective that the relevant scans, MRI scans and all that are done. I mean, that's and I presume that this has happened. If everything is fine in that respect, then a lot of this can be can stem from the cervical vertebrae in the neck. It could come from the jaw joint, where the trigeminal nerve pathway, because the trigeminal nerve pathway coming off the jaw, that whole nerve pathway can drive pain up along the side of the head. That could even come from the mid-back, where again all the muscles, the scalenes in the neck can be very, very tight. So part of our program as well is that I would do a functional movement assessment with the patients, because a lot of people have a sedentary lifestyle now. Yes, sure.
We're sleeping for 8 hours and we're sitting for 8 as well. Yeah. So the thing is that that sedentary lifestyle leads to a lot of muscular problems, and sometimes problems like this can be just mechanical.
Right. And just quickly, just psoriasis, because there's so much stuff coming in about psoriasis. That's autoimmune as well, is it?
Well, it's classed as an autoimmune, but again, it's similar to N. Right. It's similar, to Helen, my apologies. It's similar to Helen, that the skin is just another organ.
Okay.
Again, put a medical term on it. My question is, where's it coming from? Now you've got to go back and look at that person's life, what they're eating, what they're thinking, the work they do, all of that stuff. And once you start to look at that...
What about the people who say to you, but sure, all of this is genetic, my mother had it or my father had it, and so... What do you say to them, Michael?
They learnt that somewhere. No, there is no science to support that. No science to support that. As I said before, genetics are a loaded gun. The environment pulls the trigger.
Triggers.
So
okay.
by accepting that it's genetics.
So you might have a predisposition, but it doesn't necessarily mean.
Correct, because the thing. So the point I would make to people like that, forget about genetics. everything we do in our day-to-day life, everything we do, the thoughts we have, the food we eat, the way we think, all of that, that is what signals our genes to express themselves. So it's back to the environment. And people will often say to me, Fran, in the clinic, "Oh Jesus, Michael, I don't have time for this and I don't have time for that, and I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that." And I say, there are 3 things that you're doing every day that you have to do that you can change. 1, you have to eat right. 2, you have to think right. 3, you have to breathe right. Now, they are 3 simple basic things, but we're not eating right, we're not thinking right, and we're not breathing right.
Yeah, and I often say how busy I am. I checked last week, and I'm 4 hours a day on my phone. So it just goes to show you, I could be using that more productively for sure. Yeah. So this goes back to, if we manage our time and manage our energy better, we can change our lives. But we're so caught up in running here, running there, doing this, being in this organisation, because what happens is, and the way society is modelled now, is that it's social acceptance rather than self-acceptance. So this is what young people are doing. We need to present ourselves so we're socially accepted, but sure, underneath we have no self-acceptance. We lack that self-love, that self-caring, and we need to pull that back and have that self-caring and have that self-acceptance that we are where we are good at where we are, and we can change that. Rather than this idea, we can airbrush things out of our lives. We can't. Lots of people wanted to know how they can make contact with you, Michael. What's the easiest way to do that? Yeah, well, obviously you can look at the website as well, www.michaelodoherty.com, or 087 38944. 087 6721 888, and Francis, she'd be delighted to help. And we're only delighted to help. And follow me on Facebook. I put a lot of advice on there for people as well, and I'll repost this show. Videos up there. And it's just to help people. But I just want to say to people again, finally, Fran, is this: look, guys, if you're listening and if you have a problem, you can resolve it. You just need to have the right pathway to get into that solution and be solution based in your life. Very good indeed, Michael. Thanks, Helen. Lovely to see you, and I'm delighted that you're well.
I'm only here just if it will help somebody else. That's why the proof of it is. I'm the proof of it.
Indeed, you are, and as you say, you're buzzing.
I'm buzzing now. Yeah, thanks,
Helen. Thanks very much indeed to Michael as well. We'll take a break.